Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the panel discussion, Business Opportunities and Outlook in the Mekong countries. I am Michael George DeSombre, U.S. Ambassador to the Kingdom of Thailand. It is a privilege to join you today as part of the Indo-Pacific Business Forum, the premier U.S.-sponsored business event in Asia. This year, the forum is co-hosted by the Vietnamese government, and I would like to thank the organizers and hosts for putting on such a successful event under difficult circumstances. I'm honored to be joined on this panel by U.S. Ambassador to Cambodia, Patrick Murphy, U.S. Ambassador to Laos, Peter Haymond, U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam, Daniel Kritenbrink, and Chargé d'Affaires of the U.S. Mission to Myanmar, Gwen Cardno. By way of format, my fellow Chiefs of Mission and I will each speak for approximately 5 minutes about the current business climate and outlook in our respective countries and the significant benefits U.S. investment can bring to the Mekong region. We will then have about 15 minutes for Q&A. I encourage all of you participating to please submit questions as we move along through the chat window in the platform, and we will then answer as many of them as we can within the time allotted. I would ask that when you submit a question, please make clear which of us you are addressing or whether you're addressing all of us. Finally, I would like to note that obviously we would prefer to be together on one stage for this discussion, and I'm sure we will discuss the many challenges and hardships the pandemic has brought. But we intend to focus more on identifying positive opportunities as we collectively emerge from the pandemic into a new normal, asking questions such as, how will supply chains realign? Which new industries will thrive? What long-ignored structural changes can we now make work? How will innovators and entrepreneurs address our most pressing challenges? With that, I would now like to hand it over to Ambassador Kritenbrink to kick us off in Vietnam. Ambassador?
Ambassador DeSombre, good morning. To all of my colleagues, to Ambassador Haymond, Ambassador Murphy, Chargé d'Affaires, Cardno, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dan Kritenbrink, the American Ambassador to Vietnam. I'm absolutely honored to be with you here today. It's wonderful to join my colleagues from across the region to discuss business opportunities in Vietnam and the Mekong countries more broadly. And Ambassador DeSombre, thanks so much for moderating today's event. Let me start off by noting that here in Vietnam, this is a very special year because it's the 25th anniversary of the U.S.-Vietnam partnership. I think the relationship between the United States and Vietnam is the strongest it's ever been. The breadth and depth of cooperation between our two countries is simply stunning. In areas as diverse as trade, development, education, healthcare, energy, and security, the United States and a strong, prosperous, and independent Vietnam are working together with a shared commitment to peace and prosperity. Despite the challenges presented by COVID-19, we continue to see much progress in our bilateral relationship during this anniversary year. I'd like to note that the government of Vietnam has done an incredible job in managing their COVID-19 response, and the United States has been a proud partner with Vietnam in this fight. As we reflect on how much the United States and Vietnam have achieved together over the last 25 years, there's perhaps no better indicator of progress than our trade and investment relationship. In 1995, our two countries had very little trade and virtually no people-to-people connections. And today, we share $77 billion in bilateral trade. In 1994, Vietnam was America's 95th largest source of imports. Today, it ranks 12th. The United States is now Vietnam's largest export market, and Vietnam is one of America's fastest growing export markets worldwide. And with Vietnam's growing middle class and strong and stable GDP growth, U.S. companies are bullish about opportunities in Vietnam, especially in energy, infrastructure, digital economy, manufacturing, healthcare, and other sectors. Vietnam's energy demand is growing at over 10% annually. Energy, particularly LNG, represents a strategic export opportunity and a way to reduce the trade deficit with the United States. The Indo-Pacific Business Forum has highlighted several LNG power projects as achievements of the U.S.-Vietnam commercial partnership. We were delighted to witness $11.5 billion worth of signings yesterday in Hanoi. The United States remains firm in its commitment to Vietnam to ensure energy accessibility and security through private sector-led growth, diversification, and regional interconnectivity. Vietnam's impressive economic growth means that it will need many billions of dollars in infrastructure investment in the coming years. This creates opportunities for American businesses to bring their high-quality equipment, innovative technologies, and transparent business practices to Vietnam. The United States is also eager to partner with Vietnam as it pursues its digital economy goals. We're proud of our world-class leading tech companies, which can provide expertise on exciting emerging technologies like e-payments, online streaming, artificial intelligence, and smart cities technologies. As Vietnam continues to develop a digital economy, the U.S. mission to Vietnam will continue to advocate for policies that ensure data privacy and promotion of free speech. As we look at the Vietnamese economy in the context of the region, the pandemic has put a spotlight on the importance of diversified and resilient global supply chains. Through its impressive management of COVID-19, Vietnam can further increase its footprint in global supply chains, attract new businesses looking to diversify their activities, and mitigate the risks of future shocks. And U.S. companies are well positioned to help expand supply chain connectivity in Vietnam for our mutual benefit. The pandemic created a perfect storm, but now there's a watershed moment for Vietnamese and U.S. businesses to drive new partnerships, expand new business opportunities, and engage in all critical sectors here in Vietnam. With the United States as a partner, Vietnam has the potential to leapfrog into a modern, knowledge-based, digitally enabled economy. I know from my conversations with American investors in Vietnam that the process here may not always be easy, and it takes time to finalize plans. But the Vietnamese are always willing to be a partner, and most often, the two sides find equitable solutions. The U.S. private sector plays a leading role in our bilateral relationship and has the resources, technology, and expertise to help accelerate Vietnam's economic development. As you know, the United States seeks fair and balanced trade relationships and to reduce our trade deficits with all countries, including Vietnam. Vietnam plays an important role in the region, both strategically and economically. With that in mind, I want to recognize Vietnam's leadership in bringing the region together with us to launch the new Mekong-U.S. partnership just last month. This broadening of our regional cooperation will further increase our cooperation in the areas of economic connectivity, natural resource management and environmental protection, non-traditional security, including collaboration on emerging threats in health security, pandemic response, countering transnational crime, and cybersecurity. The Mekong-U.S. partnership also focuses on human resource development, including education and women's empowerment. The United States looks forward to working with Vietnam as we seek even greater success in the next 25 years of our partnership and to greater coordination and collaboration throughout the Mekong region. We look forward to working with all of you to advance our shared goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Kritenbrink. If I can now hand it over to Ambassador Murphy in Cambodia.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador DeSombre and colleagues. It's such a pleasure to be with you, and to all of our participants for this panel. I congratulate you on joining this year's Indo-Pacific Business Forum, the third version. It's been a successful 2 days thus far. I am delighted to represent the United States here in the Kingdom of Cambodia and to tell you a little bit about this market, how it fits in with the rest of the Mekong region. First of all, although it's a moderate size, 16 million people, it's growing and it's expanding. Half of that population is under the age of 25. These are young, rising, hungry youth who are increasingly tech savvy and connected to the rest of the world. This economy has been among the fastest growing for the last 10 years, anywhere in Asia, indeed anywhere in the world. And the government is moving along with the economy, investing in infrastructure gaps and moving up the manufacturing value chain. Now, we also like anniversaries here, like they do in Vietnam. Thank you, Ambassador Kritenbrink. This year's the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the United States and Cambodia. And it's been a good platform to highlight many areas of our cooperation and collaboration, especially over the last 30 years, which has been a better chapter for Cambodia, overcoming many of its very difficult chapters in the past. Now, the economy is doing fairly well, but like everywhere in the world, is taking a hit this year during COVID. The interesting thing, though, about COVID, the public health impact has been quite minimal. Under 300 cases, no communal transmission, no deaths. The government took some very early actions and built upon many of our health partnerships to reveal a fairly good story. The real impact has been on the economy, and 2021 looks a little bit uncertain. So a lot of job loss here, a lot of retracting with decline in remittances and rising personal debt and the like. The government is taking some actions to help with this economy and the economic recovery. Tax breaks in key sectors like tourism and garments, some lower interest rates, and they've injected about $300 million to focus on the most poor, vulnerable populations. Let me just highlight a couple of key sectors for those who are interested potentially in doing business in a place like Cambodia. Franchises and fast-moving consumer goods, the energy sector, education, medical needs, agriculture, and technology. All of these are probably the most fast expanding, the most need is found in those sectors. A few things to think about for investment here. Although Cambodia is not the biggest market in the region, it's nestled between the much larger markets in Vietnam and Thailand. And along the borders, there are special economic zones. It's a kind of an interesting phenomenon of a lot of inputs coming in from those neighboring countries, manufacturing taking place here, and export going back out through those neighboring countries. Cambodia benefits from trade preferences in Europe and in the United States. Pretty big in Europe, although there was a 20% cut to the everything but arms benefit package because of some governance and human rights concerns. The GSP preferences that have been accorded to Cambodia have been fully exploited, and trade has expanded exponentially from $1 billion to over $6 billion. The United States is now Cambodia's largest export market by far. And that has come about with the addition of travel goods to the GSP list. There are some benefits for investors here. 100% foreign ownership of companies is allowed. No restrictions on capital repatriation. Fairly limited currency risks, in part because this is a largely US dollarized economy. And I already mentioned the special economic zones. This is not a place without challenges, however. I'm very frank in expressing those challenges with US business and with government authorities here. There are relatively high transportation and energy costs, some of the highest electricity costs anywhere in the region. There are skilled labor shortages, and Cambodia gets very low ranking when it comes to the corruption index and the ease of doing business that's put forth by the World Bank. So companies have to be eyes wide open. It's not a particularly easy market, but there are many big companies that have entered this domain and succeeded quite well. Companies like Ford and General Electric and Chevron are all here. Many American franchises have been emerging in recent years. American products and services are valued here for their quality, for their guarantees, even if sometimes they come at a premium. With this growing middle class, it's not without reach. So that's a little snapshot on Cambodia. Ambassador DeSombre, thank you very much.
Ambassador Murphy, thank you very much. And we'll see if we continue the competition of the length of the years of relationship between the United States and the relevant countries. And with that, we'll hand it over to Chargé d'Affaires Cardno in Myanmar.
I can only continue the competition if we're talking about the shortest number of years for our relationship. Thank you, Ambassador DeSombre, and I appreciate you proposing and moderating this panel, and it's great to see some of my colleagues from around the region. Myanmar is different from the other countries in the Mekong region because of its unique history and relatively recent opening to foreign investment. The business climate in Myanmar offers many commercial opportunities for US businesses prepared to invest long-term in a frontier market. As Myanmar is forging its democratic path, the markets are adjusting and offering exceptional growth potential. Some of the sectors that are particularly promising include the digital and infrastructure sectors, as well as consumer products. US private sector involvement is dwarfed by that in Vietnam and even in Cambodia. We're on track for $1 billion of bilateral trade this year, but that is growing, and the top 5 largest American companies in Myanmar have invested over $1.5 billion. Unfortunately, as many of you know, we are in the hardest hit country for COVID in the region. We're currently at 49,000 cases, and that has had an impact on the economy. GDP growth was anticipated to be 77% in 2020, but according to the World Bank, it's now holding at 1%. On the positive side, Myanmar's economy is projected to rebound quickly from COVID-19, and unlike other countries in the region which have experienced economic contraction, Myanmar's economy has continued to grow. Its 2021 growth projection is 7.2%, the highest in the Mekong region. This strong economic outlook is due in part to Myanmar's unique advantages, including a young labor force, half of the population is under the age of 30, an emerging middle class who see American products as a marker of affluence, and the democratic system, which, to be frank, offers both challenges and opportunities. Myanmar's economy is changing and developing quickly, and the political situation is no different. The US has long supported the aspirations of Myanmar's people, democracy, peace, and prosperity. And both US government and US private sectors are viewed as good partners here. Myanmar is preparing for November 8th national elections, just 5 days after the presidential elections in the United States. No matter what the results are of the November elections in either of our countries, we expect that our foreign policy goals in Myanmar will remain consistent, including support for expanding prosperity. You might ask exactly how we've shown our commitment. Over the past several years, the United States has increased its engagement with Myanmar in a number of areas. In 2016, we ended broad-based sanctions in Myanmar. Although we've since designated targeted individuals for their roles in human rights violations, our policy is to ensure sanctions promote accountability and do not impact the lives of the people of Myanmar. Overall, the United States has provided $500 million of US government support for Myanmar since the democratic transition began. About $93 million of Myanmar exports to the United States are GSP eligible goods. We also have a new $18 million USAID responsible investment and trade activity that will facilitate investments and trade transactions by firms committed to responsible business practices. Just this week, a high-level economic delegation led by the Development Finance Corporation, including representatives of the Departments of Commerce, Treasury, State, and Energy, visited Myanmar. Myanmar is DFC's largest portfolio in Southeast Asia, with over $280 million in investments. The people of Myanmar recognize the value of the US brand. American products are seen as high quality, and American investment is seen as highly desirable. There is a huge appetite for greater economic engagement with the United States. People in Myanmar recognize that US businesses are transparent, build the skills of Myanmar workers and promote the local workforce, pay taxes, and protect the environment. Having said all of that, Myanmar does remain a frontier market. Companies must be prepared for risks and regulatory hurdles. We understand that there is some reputational risk for investing in Myanmar due to the situation in Rakhine State and the government's poor human rights record. Myanmar is also a difficult place to do business due to government regulatory hurdles and inconsistent application of regulations. There are positive signs on the latter front. The government is working to improve the ease of doing business, and economic reform and liberalization are happening. As a result, a number of US firms have recently entered the market. We expect these reforms to continue and the growth to continue, and the embassy stands ready to work with businesses that are looking for opportunities in Myanmar and with the Myanmar government in making this a better place to do business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chargé d'Affaires Cardno. And now I'll turn it over to Ambassador Haymond in Laos.
Thank you very much, Ambassador DeSombre, and good day to my colleagues and to all those who are joining us for this session. Laos is the one country in the Mekong subregion that connects with all of the other countries here, including China as well. And it's uniquely situated to take advantage and be connected to the major markets in Vietnam and Thailand, as well as up north through China. Laos currently faces some short-term debt challenges. Up until COVID hit earlier this year, Laos was also among the ASEAN leaders in GDP growth rates for at least the past decade. And it boasts strong fundamentals. In addition to its central location, most notably, and will continue in competition here, what I'm told is currently the youngest population in ASEAN. So take that half 25 and half 30. It is a young growing population here in the of course, in the Mekong region. Laos has also done very well so far in managing the health impacts of COVID. We're under 100. The Lao government has confirmed less than 100 cases here without transmission, and they're prepping for what's hoped to be a gradual opening of borders in the Mekong over the next few months. We hope some improved opening. And the economy is expected to rebound in the medium term through continued investment in energy, minerals, logistics, agriculture, tourism, and light manufacturing. And there's a growing middle and upper middle class in Vientiane, the capital, that's providing a new urban market for higher end goods and services. I was just talking to a Ford representative earlier today, and Ford, like some other excellent, great US companies, are seeing this demand from the Vientiane market. There's a few high potential investment and trade sectors I'd like to highlight in just a moment. First of all is energy, which has been driving much of Laos's growth over the past decade or so, particularly in hydropower. But there's also a great deal of untapped solar and wind power potential that is going to give Laos an opportunity to help contribute to meeting the Mekong region's power demands. Ambassador Kritenbrink mentioned that in Vietnam, Thailand as well, and others. In addition to energy, Laos's digital ecosystem is also growing fast. Nearly all of the country's internet users base their operations, including their business operations, on Facebook and secondarily on WhatsApp. And US commercial engagement in this space, along with our own discussions with the government, can help shape Laos's digital economy while creating new commercial opportunities for other US companies. I mentioned Laos's central regional location. There's also direct benefits to participate in and benefit from the connectivity that is ongoing right now. New and planned roads and bridges will reduce travel times and cement Laos's place as the central link in the advancing east-west corridor that's going to go not just between Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand, but eventually all the way west to India. There are new dry ports, one operating very successfully down in central Laos across from Thailand, and a new logistics park being built in Vientiane that will reinforce Laos's strategic role in regional freight transport and create investment opportunities for logistics firms. US commercial engagement in Laos is starting from a very low baseline, but there's plenty of room for growth, and that trade has been expanding rapidly in recent years. And this trade has tended to be driven by foreign investment coming to Laos as well elsewhere, producing for the market, but it's a relatively small market compared to its neighbors, but producing for export, much of it back into the region. As an example, I just visited a couple of weeks ago Coca-Cola's bottling plant a little ways north of Vientiane. This facility opened just a few years ago, and it bottles and distributes Coca-Cola products for Laos, but also for much of northeastern Thailand, just across the border. 300 local staff with 300, almost all of its staff local. The Coca-Cola plant was recently recognized by the parent company for its performance and achievement of Coke's top standards internationally, as one little illustration of the human capital potential here when there's some investment in raising those skills. So between the long-term fundamentals and the central location, there's a considerable greenfield potential here particularly for companies who already have operations in neighboring countries nearby and are looking to expand in another market close by that can assist. In common with some of my colleagues, need to say that Laos is still a least developing country. Its business and regulatory environment still reflects that it's at the low end, moving its way up the channel in convenience. The government recognizes that and is looking to address its business environment. We, the U.S. government, are working with the Lao government closely through USAID and other partnerships to help them in that movement. And Laos continues to benefit from its connections with its ASEAN partners. First of all, is through the connections, the virtual ones that will help the trucks and trains move around the region. But beyond that, through the digital and the financial and even the regulatory networks and standards that are being set throughout ASEAN, Laos is benefiting from because it's pulling itself up to the regional norm. So whether in some of the areas I've mentioned, other areas such as tourism and services and agriculture with good growth prospects here, I would encourage all interested companies that are looking at another young, developing, well-connected market in the Mekong region to be in touch with our team. We'll do our best to help you find the right opportunity for you. Thanks very much. Back to you, Ambassador DeSombre.
Thank you, Ambassador Haymond, and thank you to all my colleagues participating here on the video, and thank you to everyone joining from around the world. Again, I'm Michael George DeSombre, the U.S. Ambassador to the Kingdom of Thailand. Over the next 5 minutes or so, I want to share with you a brief overview of the Thai investment climate and why companies choose Thailand, highlight some of our efforts to help Thailand become an even more attractive destination for foreign investors, and talk briefly about the unique advantages U.S. investors and companies bring to Thailand and the region. First, a little bit about myself. I came to government service after more than 20 years in the private sector, helping companies invest and grow their businesses around Asia. After being appointed by President Trump, I arrived in Thailand in late January, looking to bring my expertise to bear. I had barely begun when the pandemic hit, which, as you can imagine, had a huge impact both on Thailand's economic outlook and on my short-term priorities as ambassador. But fortunately, Thailand, like most of the other Mekong countries, handled the pandemic well and has been able to relax nearly all of the most restrictive lockdown measures, which I will talk about in a minute. And now the government, private sector, and the Thai people are actively working out what comes next. What does the new normal look like for Thailand? At the request of our Thai government partners, since June, I've developed specific recommendations to help Thailand attract more U.S. investment, capture supply chains relocating from other countries, and become a regional financial services hub, foster venture capital and startup ecosystem, and other ideas. To develop these recommendations, I spoke to numerous U.S. companies and financial experts, both inside and outside Thailand. In doing so, I learned a lot about why the companies that are here chose Thailand, and why the companies that are not here chose somewhere else. One thing I have learned is that the pandemic has led many companies to re-examine their global business operations, investments, and supply chains to ensure they are safe, reliable, and secure. Safe supply chains run through countries that are friends and allies, that share a commitment to transparency, individual opportunity, and markets free from domination by the state. Reliable supply chains run through countries with a free and robust media and an independent judiciary that share a commitment to the rule of law and sanctity of contracts. And secure supply chains exist in countries where companies are protected from cyber theft and violations of their intellectual property rights. One reason U.S. companies choose Thailand is because the U.S.-Thai relationship is strong and based on mutual commitment to these shared values. The U.S. and Thailand have enjoyed an unbroken close commercial relationship since the 1833 Treaty of Amity and Commerce, which still affords special privileges to U.S. companies operating here. Many U.S. companies have been operating in Thailand for generations. American companies have collectively invested tens of billions of dollars in Thailand, and the United States remains Thailand's top export market. I also want to specifically highlight our health cooperation, which is particularly relevant given current circumstances. The Armed Forces Research Institute of Medical Sciences, or AFRIMS, has been cooperating with Thai scientists for over 60 years, developing cutting-edge vaccines that have saved countless lives. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has its largest office outside the United States, right here in Bangkok, and has been working closely with the Ministry of Public Health and other Thai officials on pandemic response. I am confident that our cooperation contributed to Thailand's strong public health response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In Thailand, we have had essentially no domestically transmitted cases since May, and in many ways, daily life has returned to normal. Thailand is one of the world's success stories in this regard. The Thai government is now working to capitalize on this success to attract companies and supply chains to Thailand. Furthermore, U.S. companies broadly give Thailand's pandemic response strong marks for prioritizing the preservation of commerce and industry. Many U.S. factories continue to run at or near capacity, even at the height of the lockdown, and some companies even moved operations to Thailand during the pandemic to escape restrictive lockdowns in other countries. Thailand has a strong manufacturing base, particularly in the automotive sector and other mid-range manufacturing. Under its Thailand 4.0 development strategy, Thailand is now focused on attracting next-generation, high-value-added manufacturing and services in 12 key sectors, among them next-generation automobiles, smart electronics, robotics, logistics, and aviation. The Thai Board of Investment, or BOI, supports this strategy by offering a broad range of investment incentives to foreign investors, depending on sector, type of investment, and other factors. BOI also offers special incentives for companies looking to establish regional headquarters in Thailand. U.S. companies report that BOI's incentive packages are very competitive. They rate BOI highly for professionalism, support, and transparency. BOI can offer a flexible menu of incentives, including corporate income tax exemptions for up to 10 years, exemptions to import duties for machinery, raw materials, and other inputs, and many other tax and non-tax exemptions, depending on type, sector, and location of interest. For more information, I encourage you to contact the BOI directly, which even has offices in New York and Los Angeles. Alternatively, my team is also happy to make connections for interested investors. Thailand's signature economic development initiative currently is the Eastern Economic Corridor, or EEC, an area-based development project that covers 3 provinces and involves the construction of industrial estates and next-generation support infrastructure in the form of new roads, high-speed rail, airports, and seaports. The EEC office has the authority to offer additional special incentives and regulatory concessions above and beyond those offered by the BOI. I recently toured the EEC, and I'm pleased to report that all the U.S. companies I visited there were in the process of expanding operations, moving into R&D, and innovating on site. It appears the EEC project is moving in the right direction. Thailand is located at the heart of ASEAN, has very high-quality infrastructure, and is therefore a natural fit as a logistics and transportation hub for mainland Southeast Asia. We are currently working to help Thailand integrate its existing infrastructure and optimize intermodal transport and logistics capabilities. We are encouraging reforms to custom procedures to allow cargo to be efficiently transferred from one mode of transport to another, for instance, from air to truck. In these discussions, I've heard that one of the major challenges in this regard is red tape and bureaucracy amongst the Mekong countries at regional land border crossings. I would like to therefore use this platform today to invite my fellow regional ambassadors to help us all facilitate cross-border infrastructure upgrades and more efficient customs agreements and procedures to ensure seamless regional logistics for the benefits of all the Mekong countries. Earlier this week, the United States and Thailand took an important step forward in our collaboration on energy issues by holding our first ever energy policy dialogue. During this high-level event, the United States reaffirmed its commitment to help Thailand realize its vision of becoming a regional energy hub. This will create commercial opportunities for both American and Thai companies and improve the business operating environment in the region through broader access to more reliable, less expensive sources of energy. One of the silver linings of the pandemic has been the acceleration of the development of the digital economy. We've heard about that in a number of the presentations today. We here are working to help Thailand in this regard as well, through the digitization of financial services, the development of smart cities and digital infrastructure, and other areas. In my travels throughout Thailand and my conversations with Thai officials, I have seen the specific benefits U.S. companies can bring to Thailand. U.S. companies are leaders in technology and innovation, but also in often overlooked areas, such as workforce development, labor relations, corporate social responsibility, transparency, and workplace safety. These factors not only give U.S. companies a competitive advantage, they contribute to Thailand's achievement of its own development goals. That is why Thai officials are eager for U.S. investments. And we at the embassy are likewise eager to help you explore how you can contribute to our long-standing economic and commercial relationship, which has brought so much benefit to both our nations. If you want to learn more about the opportunities here, please do not hesitate to reach out to my economic and commercial team at the embassy. Thank you very much. So now we're going to go into a question and answer. Hopefully this will work. I have someone feeding me questions that we're getting from the group chat. So some of these will be directed to individual ambassadors. Some of them will be directed to all of us. I will start off with a question for Ambassador Murphy in Cambodia. Sounds like someone's particularly interested in investing in Cambodia and would like to know, what strategy would you recommend for U.S. businesses looking to enter and successfully operate in Cambodia?
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and appreciate the question. Two quick things come to mind where the United States can actually be of help to businesses looking to enter the market. First, we have a terrific economic commercial section here at the embassy that is well liaised with regional offices, particularly in Vietnam and Thailand, that house U.S. government agencies from the economic realm. Across the region, of course, and for everyone's benefit, we have many agencies represented here in the region, departments of commerce and treasury, the Development Finance Corporation, U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and of course, outreach from Exim Bank and others. Our section is a good entry point to help companies navigate where in the vast realm of government offices here in the country, in Cambodia, we can help direct you. We also have a growing and expanding American Chamber of Commerce here. It's probably a little bit more modest than what you might find in places like Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, and Bangkok. But over 120 companies are members of AmCham Cambodia, and it's increasingly active for advocacy. And working here with the embassy, we made some inroads. We've opened up market access for automobiles that required some regulatory changes. This has been particularly beneficial to Ford Motor Vehicle Company. We hope other U.S. automobile manufacturers will take advantage of that as well. U.S. companies are also working with the government here on amending and changing and evolving laws regarding the digital economy, on cyber, et cetera. So those two things come to mind for me. And our economic commercial section is very, very well connected with the relevant ministries and investment entities here in Cambodia. It'd be a very, very good starting point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Murphy. Now we have a question for all of us, and I think we'll go in the order that we appear on the screens, although I will go last. Question seems to be particularly relevant in all of our countries, which is specifically related to technical and vocational education and training to provide sufficient skilled labor. What are the policies in the different countries to try to support additional vocational training so that American and other investors can be confident they have sufficient trained or capable workforce in the various countries? Maybe we'll start off with Ambassador Haymond.
Sure, thanks for that question. Here in Laos, given its economic status, there is not the existing pool of high-skilled labor that you would want. It exists, but it's small relative to demand. So the successful companies are coming in here and doing a lot of their own training. We and other donor partners in the Lao government are working on improving their educational system overall. But for specific industrial-based skills, a lot of that training is going to be undertaken by the companies that are coming in here. And we're seeing U.S. firms and other firms doing that in the various SEZs. And they've got good material to work with, but it takes some investment on the part of many of the investors here, and investment in the education. Follow up on Ambassador Murphy's point about recommend people looking at the Lao market come in and talk to us. We can help introduce to some other successful U.S. firms here and give them a sense of the realities and the opportunities on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador. If I can ask Chargé d'Affaires Cardno about the talent training and vocational training in Myanmar.
Thank you, Ambassador. Similar to Laos, we do not have a deep bench as far as trainees go, but it is actually a growth sector for U.S. businesses. For instance, Dale Carnegie has seen a huge increase in its business here, so it is an area where there is an opportunity. We do see many of the foreign companies that come in here provide training, and I'll echo what Ambassador Haymond and Ambassador Murphy had to say, which is that we do have a foreign commercial service representative here, and they and our economic section would be happy to help anyone who is looking at this market. We also do have a growing AmCham here, and they would welcome inquiries as well.
Thank you. Ambassador Kritenbrink, if I can kick it over to you for that question.
Thank you. I'd say the Vietnamese workforce is increasingly well-educated, dynamic, hardworking, and I think it's an attractive aspect of investing in Vietnam. And the Vietnamese are increasingly investing further into their education sector. And we're a partner in helping them do that because we, like our Vietnamese friends, know how important that is to Vietnam's future economic development. We have invested in the joint venture between the U.S. and Vietnamese governments, namely Fulbright University Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City, which is an incredibly impressive institution educating some of Vietnam's finest students in Vietnam's first independent university modeled on American concepts of academic freedom. We have a large number of English teaching assistants and other English language experts on the ground to try to up Vietnam's game in terms of their English language skills, and we will soon bring the U.S. Peace Corps here as well to exclusively focus on English language training with the enthusiastic support of the Vietnamese government. There are 30,000 Vietnamese students studying in the United States, so the study abroad programs in Vietnam are incredible emphasis, and it's been amazing to watch what those students do when they come back to Vietnam and join the workforce here. And as some of my other colleagues mentioned, many of our great companies here on the ground, I'm thinking of Intel and the like, they do have pretty successful internal training programs as well. Additionally, just on the previous question about if you were interested in investing in Vietnam, absolutely, please come contact us. You can contact me or members of my team, the Department of State, the Foreign Commercial Service, Foreign Agricultural Service, USTDA, many others are on the ground here. We're here to help you. That's why we exist here. We have longstanding chambers of commerce in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City who have been here for more than 25 years, and the leadership of those AmChams, many of them have been involved with Vietnam for more than 3 decades. So if you contact the embassy, get in touch with our AmChams, we can help give you the lay of the land. I'd also recommend that investors interested in Vietnam think about a good local partner which can help you along the way as well. Thank you.
Great. And Ambassador Murphy, perhaps a final answer on this question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think skilled labor shortages in Cambodia is a reality, and it's important for any company to realize that. Cambodia 30 years ago was starting from almost zero, a country ravaged by decades of war, genocide and exodus for many who fled abroad. The past 30 years have been a rebuilding process. The good news is this: the government recognizes the shortage challenge. The Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training has the lead and is responsible. There are emerging technology centers that we support. There are also agricultural technology model farms. Agriculture is very important for the Cambodia economy, and there's a need to transition to higher tech processes. Also, U.S. companies that come here and set up shop establish their own training programs. and they're really quite successful. Coca-Cola is one that comes to mind. And the positive aspect there for companies that do that is they're working with some good ingredients. As I mentioned, this is a very young country. So you have a lot of youth, a lot of youthful minds that want to work, want to enter the market, that can be educated and trained. English language, like in Vietnam, we're supporting training in this country through Peace Corps, through Fulbright, through English language fellows. And the encouraging news is the results are pretty spectacular. Cambodian English language capability is quite surprisingly high and expanding every year. So the combination of youth and English language capability means that although there is skilled labor shortages, it's an area where there's good potential to work with and overcome that as a hurdle. But it's good to be eyes wide open about those shortages. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think someone asked the question very observantly that of the 5 countries represented here, 4 of them seem to be some of the best countries in the world, actually, as it relates to COVID. So the question is, how does that regard, or what does each country thinking about in terms of reopening the economy to foreign travelers, both tourists and business travelers? Maybe I'll take the first crack at that in Thailand, and then we can go around the room again. I mean, in Thailand, the borders are still relatively closed, except for returnees and other people with special visa statuses. There definitely is a contemplation of allowing in tourism, and there's been a start of that with some tourist flights from China, but those tourists are still subject to 14-day quarantines. There is the possibility for certain business travelers still subject to 14-day quarantine. There is discussions about higher-end business travelers, CEOs or foreign investors that want to come into Thailand to finalize investment plans and others, getting exceptions to that 14-day quarantine and being able to come in shorter trips subject to very tight controls and otherwise. But I'm not aware that those have actually been implemented yet. But if you are someone in that category, you should reach out to us, and I think we have the ability to get you special exceptions to come. But Thailand is still very concerned about letting COVID in, even though there is significant impact on the economy due to the restriction on tourism. There is a general greater fear of the virus still percolating amongst most of the people in Thailand. One would think that eventually they will relax controls because of the impact upon the economy, and I do see that eventually happening, but it still is not yet there. But please do reach out to us if you want to try to get some special exceptions to come here, and I would think in the coming months there will be changes in this regard. Maybe I'll kick it first over to Vietnam to answer that question as well with regard to Vietnam. Ambassador Kritenbrink.
Thank you, Ambassador DeSombre. Yes, Vietnam has done an outstanding job in controlling COVID. Just over 1,000 cases total out of a population of 96 million, just over 30 cases, 30 deaths since the start of the pandemic. I think Vietnam knew early on that its healthcare and public health sector resources are limited and could be overwhelmed if the virus spread out of control. And therefore, they were very motivated, very aggressive in getting on top of and ahead of the spread of the pandemic. And we've been a key partner in helping them. Now, life here has largely returned to normal. Early on in the pandemic, we went 99 days without a documented case of community spread. Then there was an outbreak in Da Nang, and restrictions were implemented in the Da Nang area. Now we've gone nearly a couple of months again without a documented case of community spread. So life has largely returned to normal internally. Like our friends in Thailand, the Vietnamese are still moving slowly and are reluctant to open up too quickly to the outside world. But the major development in this regard, in the last month, 4 to 6 weeks or so, the Vietnamese have implemented new procedures whereby short-term visitors in certain categories, particularly business visitors, experts, foreign government officials, and the like, can visit Vietnam without doing the mandatory 14-day quarantine. But the requirements are that you must arrive with a negative COVID test in hand, having had that test done in 3 to 5 days prior to arrival. You must then test upon arrival and have your negative test result back in hand before you can do your outside meetings. You're then allowed to do your meetings, but you are restricted from doing other outside activities. And so it's designed to let people come in for the short term to do meetings and otherwise stay in their hotel. Otherwise, anyone who comes into Vietnam is subject to a 14-day quarantine and testing requirements as well. So they've taken these limited steps to, again, try to attract business travelers, investors, foreign government officials and the like under the restrictions that I've outlined. That's been quite successful. I think we're still a ways away from seeing the tourism market reopen. Although the Japanese Prime Minister Suga was just here and the Vietnamese did announce some easing of travel restrictions between Vietnam and Japan. So I think you'll see some limited steps like that. Slow in the tourism sector. They'll continue to open, I'm confident, in the business and foreign visitor sector. And that's been quite useful for us. We've had 2 senior government delegations come to Vietnam, and we'll have the 3rd tonight when the Secretary of State arrives. Over.
Great, thank you. If I can kick it over to Ambassador Murphy in Cambodia for thoughts on this question.
Yeah, I think a similar story here in Cambodia. Relatively strict entry requirements have been part of the success story. Under 300 cases, 0 deaths, no communal transmission. And we've been part of the successful response. We have the US CDC on the ground here, our National Institutes for Health, US Navy, State Department, USAID, all working on the COVID response. The reality is, like in many countries, there's a struggle between the public health priorities and the economic priorities. And to date, the public health has kind of reigned supreme. Tourism in a normal year accounts for 15% of Cambodia's GDP, and tourism is down 95%. So it's a huge blow to the economy. There's a lot of reasons that Cambodia will want to open up, especially in 2021. Cambodia next June plans to host the ASEM meeting, Asia-Europe meeting. In a normal holding of that meeting, some 50 plus heads of government, heads of state would travel and convene. They're very desirous of being able to do that. Looking a little further down the road, Cambodia assumes the ASEAN chair in 2022. I think in the meantime, though, you're going to see, until there's a vaccine, the ultimate solution, real scrutiny on entry into this country, which has been part of the success story. Nonetheless, at the same time, cargo trade continues essentially unabated. A lot of air cargo, a lot of sea cargo, a lot of overland trade with Vietnam and Thailand in particular. They've got some interesting mechanisms in place where cargo transfers from one truck to the other, so no personnel are crossing the border with Vietnam, for example. You're going to see exports to the United States continue, virtually unabated. Last year was a 40% growth. This year, despite COVID challenges, that market has expanded over 20%, close to 25%, despite disruptions to international supply chains and the like. But I would not look, I can't speak for the government of Cambodia, but I would not look for a major change to the equation of pretty close, strict entry requirements going into the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can ask Ambassador Haymond to provide some thoughts on this question.
Sure, thank you. Similar situation, and the Lao government, of course, is watching carefully what its neighbors does in balancing the health economic equation. Health is dominated here. There's been 5 cases, confirmed cases of COVID identified since April. All of those were identified in quarantine and were people who had just traveled in. The government is just now announced the possibility of tourist groups doing some quarantine time before they arrive, and then coming with a negative test, getting a test just after arrival, and going exactly on a fixed itinerary, and then departing. I don't think it's been tried out yet. They're opening that up potentially, but to countries without community transmission at the moment. So I think it's going to be easiest in the months ahead as each of our countries, and particularly Laos, goes a little step by step forward to travel within the subregion, and more difficult from countries further afield. see other thoughts. The other point being that because of the calculus, I agree with Ambassador Murphy, health is taking priority, even though there is a big hit in the tourism sector, also important here. I anticipate there will be these continued small steps with experts, key business people coming in, which may ease arrival until there are some negative experiences. And so it could very well be a process with hiccups. That is, if a group comes in under a slightly relaxed provision and that group proves to have some positive cases, that'll probably cause some rethinking. So I think just repeating what's said a little bit before, until there's a vaccine, it's going to be a very slow, uncertain process towards it. Thanks.
Okay, if I can ask Chargé Cardno for some final thoughts on this question.
Thank you. I am the one outlier here, obviously. It's interesting to hear about the testing of folks coming in over the border. That was what Myanmar had focused on for controlling the outbreak here. Up until mid-August, we had fewer than 300 cases. So it is entirely possible. Some of these countries have better controls on their borders than others, but it is entirely possible for this disease to come in even with a very strict quarantine regime in place. This government has been working very hard on controlling the pandemic, and it has leveled off now. We have given support from CDC, USAID, and the US military. So we expect for it to stay somewhere around where it is now. There is some, we have the same, obviously, we have the same economic versus health sort of balance here, but polling has shown that the people of Myanmar feel that the government has done the right thing in taking the health path over the econ path. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We're reaching the end of our hour of allocated time. I think from listening to all my fellow chiefs of mission here, it's clear that each country in the Mekong region is very eager for foreign investments, is very welcoming of it, and is trying to do whatever they can to attract it and move up the value chain. And I think you actually have an interesting contrast amongst these 5 countries of that entire sort of value chain. And so depending upon what nature of country you participants are interested in investing in, there's probably one of them amongst the 5 of us here. And you should definitely feel free to reach out to any of us. The US embassies in the region stand ready, willing, and able to help you address your investment concerns, help you finalize your investment projects, and help bring them to fruition for the benefit of the economic partnerships between the US and these Mekong countries. So with that, I'd like to again thank my fellow chiefs of missions for participating here today. Thank all of you listening in, and I wish the continuing success of this Indo-Pacific Forum, and thanks again to Vietnam for co-hosting it with us. And we look forward to seeing many of you again next year, hopefully in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.